Hi there, Eimear here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 182, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids. And as is customary, I start with a prayer for peace. Gomara Siacon ar fud na crinne. Gomara Siacon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha. Ganairi Lin lena cuid garmacha. Gamwich buichas jiv, je chuvdaka is spirit chuvdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into ploughshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. Well, you've gathered now that this is a recording where I will be, or where I am, is that there's not enough signal, so I have pre-recorded this, and I'm going to tell a story. So we're coming to the end of Lunasa, and this is a Lunasa story. Well, a Lunasa story from my perspective anyway. And even though it's an old story, I think it has a lot of relevance for these times. Let me begin. You've heard the story of Lugh, the great warrior, Lugh Lámhfhada, Lugh of the long arm, Lugh Savaldonach, Lugh the many-skilled one, and how he saved Ireland and his people, the Tuatha Dé Danann, from enslavement and terror at the hands of Balor na Sualnive, Balor of the evil eye. Well, in that saga, there are two references to a little druid woman called Bearog, who helped the situation. Now, I'm that little druid woman. I am Bearog. And might I tell you, I am only little on the outside. So now I'm going to tell you the real version of this story. Balor had his stronghold on Tory Island off the Donegal coast. And he was the evilest, ugliest, most horrendous creature ever. And he had one eye in the middle of his forehead. Now, how he got that one eye is a story for another time. But what I can say is that it took 20 warriors with ropes to pull up the eyelid. And all Balor had to do was look, and anyone or anything that he laid eyes on was instantly burnt to a cinder. Now, Balor held the whole island of Ireland to ransom, where every year at an appointed time, he demanded children, women, cattle, horses, meat, crops as a tax from the people. And the Tuatha Dé Danann, for all of their magic and all their power, couldn't do anything to save themselves from the evil of Balor. Now, this wasn't helped either by the fact that the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann at that time was Bres. Now, why he was elected, I'll never understand. But such is the way with democracy. It was as bad then as it is now, with so-called sensible people electing tyrants or idiots into power. Now, Bres, he was half Tuatha and half Fomorian. And on the outside, he was handsome. But in the inside, he was evil and vicious. That was his Fomorian side. Bres, he colluded with Balor, and nobody could do anything to stop him. Needless to say, I was getting very fed up with this situation. And it seemed to me if the people of Ireland were not going to use their skills in magic or their skills as warriors, well, then I had to do something about the situation myself. And so I became what you would probably call in these times a secret agent. And I flew all around the island watching, collecting information. gathering intel, as you'd probably call it. Now, Balor had a wife called Caitlin, she of the crooked teeth, a witch who could easily match Balor in terms of temperament, spirit, and soul. They deserved each other. They were two of the ugliest, evilest of people ever to have walked on this land. Now, one great mystery was that they produced a beautiful little girl with the sweetest of temperaments, with long golden hair and blue-green eyes. Now, I was present the night she was born, and she was called Ethna. Now, it was the custom in ancient times that when a child of a king or a chieftain was born, a druid was asked to consult the stars and divine the child's future. Besides me, there was another druid present who prophesied that Balor's daughter would have a son who would kill his grandfather. Now, immediately on hearing this prophecy, people called for the baby to be killed instantly. This was my chance to act. So I took Balor aside and persuaded him not to kill his infant daughter, because it would make him look very weak if it appeared that he was afraid of a mere baby. I suggested that he keep his daughter in a tower and that she be cared for by only women, away from any man. And sure, if Ethna was never to know what a man was, let alone encounter one, well, then Balor would be safe. Now, he fancied himself, with the one eye as a great seer. Although he wasn't completely stupid, he was not as wise or as clever as he thought. Therefore, he fell for my ruse and agreed to my suggestion. And so it was that Ethna was taken to a tower on Tory Island to be cared for by servant women. And they were given instructions on pain of death. No man was ever to be allowed onto the island, and that there was never to be any mention of men in Ethna's presence. Now, Ethna grew up in a tower on that island in the company of women. Now, it must be said that these women loved her dearly and took very good care of her. However, Ethna spent much of her life alone, as there were no other children on the island. Her playmates were the wind and the sea, the sun, the moon and the stars, and also the birds. And they'd sing to each other and create many magical songs together. And Ethna knew every nook and cranny, every blade of grass, every flower on that island. So she was happy and content. Now, occasionally her father would visit, and it would put the fear of the Dawarku, the dark beast, into all of the women when they heard him thundering across the island. Poor Ethna was petrified of him. For although he was her father, she held no love for him. She was always terrified that he'd open the one eye and that she'd be burnt to a cinder. And as soon as he'd enter the room, she'd recoil as far away as she could from him, seek a hiding place behind the skirts of one of the women. And so the years went on. Now, I kept an eye on things on Tory Island from my cave on the mainland. And Ethna, well, she grew up to be a beautiful young woman. And she told me years later that although she was happy living with the women on the island, she could sense there was something missing in her life. There was that deep longing for something in her heart, but she could not name what it was. And she described how she would stand on the ramparts of the tower and look out over the sea towards the coastline of Donegal, looking for something, but not knowing what it was, but deep down sensing that as soon as she saw it, she would. Now, in the meantime, there was a handsome-looking man called Kian, and he too was having dreams of a beautiful woman with long golden hair and blue-green eyes. And he could see her looking out from a tower. And Kian had such a longing for her. And he sensed that she was looking for him too. So he came to me in the hope that I might identify this beautiful woman who haunted his dreams. Now, he insisted that I tell him who she was because he could not live without her. So I told Kian about Ethna and that Balor was her father. Now, it so happened that Balor had stolen Kian's magic cow, the Glashgavlin. But that is a story for another time. Now, Kian begged me to take him over to Tory because he had to see Ethna. Now, I agreed on the condition that Kian did it exactly as I instructed. Now, he was very well aware that this would be indeed a very dangerous mission, and so he agreed. And I dressed him up as a young woman. And I flew him over to Tory, and we landed on the far side to where Ethna was in her tower. We threw water over ourselves and walked towards the tower. We knocked on the door and told the women, who answered that our boat had sunk and that we needed shelter for a while. Well, the woman bade us welcome, but warned us that under no circumstances were we to make any reference to a man or men. We agreed. Now, the women had lived in such isolation, were so glad to have new company, and we spent a wonderful afternoon together, regaling Ethna and her carers with stories of the outside world. Oh, and they were so hungry for such news. Now, all the time, I could see Kian looking at Ethna. He was mesmerised by her beauty. And she was also looking at him shyly, though she saw him as a young woman. Then the time came for me to act. So I took out from beneath my cloak a silver branch and began to shake it. It made the sweetest sound. The women, they fell into the deepest of sleeps, and soon they were snoring. In fact, so powerful was the sound of the silver branch that every living creature on the island fell into a deep sleep. The mice, the hares, the birds, even the sea and the wind were quiet and still. Now, I'd ensured that Kian and Ethna would not be affected by the sound. And I quickly introduced myself and Kian, who suddenly began to take off his dress. And Ethna stood in wonder at the goings-on. And then, as soon as she laid eyes on Kian as he really was, there was an instant recognition. She had found what she'd been missing in her life. And they looked deeply into each other's eyes and they smiled. Now, feeling in the way, I said that I was going for a walk and that I'd be back by dawn. Well, they hardly heard me. They were so taken up with each other. And both Kian and Ethna told me afterwards what had happened that night. Kian explained who he was and told Ethna of the prophecy. And this was why she was kept in the tower. Well, it was love at first sight for the two of them. And they embraced and lay together for the rest of the night. Now, I spent the night walking around the island, and as dawn came, I ran back to the tower and said we had to leave the island at once. Well, Kian insisted that Ethna come too, but I said, I have only strength to carry one of you. Then Kian said he would not leave her and would stay on the island with her. Now, both Ethna and I knew that could never be, for Balor would surely kill him, and Ethna, and the women. Ethna insisted that he leave with me, and that the memory of his love and their night together would sustain her. Now the women were beginning to stir, and I knew that we were running out of time. So Ethna and Kian kissed one last time, and saying goodbye, I quickly flew Kian away from the island. And as we were flying away from the island, we could hear Balor thundering across the island to the tower, and the tower shook as Balor barged in angrily into the room. I smell a man in here. And of course, the women assured him that there was no, nor had there been a man there. And Ethna asked him in an innocent voice, what is a man? And luckily he, for all his so-called all-seeingness, could neither see her blushes, her sparkle in her eyes, otherwise he'd surely have guessed. Well, he huffed and he puffed, and off he left. Now, I flew back every now and again to Tory, and I talked to Ethna. And the weeks went by, and I began to notice changes in Ethna's body. And I explained to her what was happening, and how the prophecy might be fulfilled. Now, we had agreed that she would never tell her women, for we knew that the only thing that could save them from the wrath of Balor was their innocence. Well, 9 months went by, and Ethna managed to keep the pregnancy from the women. And, it's interesting to note that when something seems impossible, you cannot see it, even when it's under your very nose. And so it was that Ethna went into labour, much to the amazement of her women. Unfortunately for her, her labour was not too difficult, and she gave birth to 3 baby boys. And she loved them as soon as she laid eyes on them. And she put them to her breast 2 at a time. Now Ethna knew their existence could not be kept from Balor for long, so she decided to love them and enjoy them for as long as she had them with her. And we had arranged that when the time came, I would take her babies and have them cared for, which of course was not very long at all. Soon Balor could be heard thundering his way across towards the tower. The whole island trembled, and the waves crashed frenziedly against the cliffs as if in fear of him. And he burst through the door in a wild rage, screaming that he had been betrayed. Although his one eye was closed, he could somehow sense Ethna's 3 babies, and he came across the room towards her and grabbed the infants, who were wrapped up in a single blanket, and left saying that he was going to kill them. Ethna followed him, begged him not to hurt them, but it was no use. He marched up towards the parapet and threw the babies in their bundle into the sea. And as the bundle was falling, however, the pin that held the bundle closed opened, and one baby fell out, went into the sea, and a second baby fell out and into the sea, and sadly were lost. Now, I'd been flying towards Tory Island at the time and arrived just in time, and I managed to grab the 3rd baby before he hit the waves. Luckily, Balor didn't notice this, and he left immediately, smug in the belief that the prophecy had been averted. And I looked up at the parapet and saw Ethna looking down, broken-hearted, at the loss of her infant sons. I nodded to her, and then flew off south towards the coast of Donegal. Ethna stood on the parapet watching me take her son to safety. She called out to me, "Please take care of my son. His name is Lugh, the Shining One." Ethna told me later that she prayed and prayed that her son would be safe and would grow up to be big and strong so that he could fulfill the prophecy about his grandfather. This gave her a reason to live. And with the love that she had shared with Kian on that one night, and the love for her son, she had the strength to withstand the loneliness of living on the island without her man or her children. And she told me that she was aware that this loneliness was the price that she had to pay for knowing love, and she was pleased to say that it was worth it. Now, having left Tory Island, I flew to my cave in Donegal to rest for a while before taking the infant Lugh to Thalshu to be fostered by her. And Ethna and I had agreed that we would keep Lugh's existence a secret from her women and also from Kian. And it was also agreed that Lugh would not know who his parents were, for we knew that it was the women's innocence that would keep them safe from Balor. And that if Kian knew, well, then he'd go in search of Lugh, and then surely Balor would find out. Then they would all be in danger. So over the years, I flew over to see Ethna, and I would fill her in on how Lugh was doing, how he grew up to be a fine and honourable young man, how skilled he was at so many things. Oh, and I so enjoyed telling him how he gained access to Tara and became known as Lugh Savildonach, Lugh the Many-Skilled One. Oh, and she was so proud of him. But it was a very sad day when I had to tell Ethna of the death of Kian. She was broken-hearted. You see, she'd secretly hoped that one day the prophecy would be fulfilled and that she and Kian would be together once more. But alas, that was never to be. And years passed, and I and the Tuatha were getting very tired of having to pay tributes to Balor. And so with my encouragement, they decided to fight back with Lugh as their leader. And so a great battle known as the Second Battle of Moitura ensued between the Tuatha and the Fomorians. Lugh slew his grandfather using a slingshot, which pushed the eye out of his head, and it landed in front of his own men who were behind him, who were instantly slain. And so the Fomorians were defeated, and they quickly left the island of Ireland. The prophecy had been fulfilled, and there was peace at last in the land. After the battle, I told Lugh about his real identity and the prophecy, and when he heard this, he wanted to find his mother. So I brought him quickly to Tory, and she recognised him immediately because he so looked like his father. And the reunion was so joyous. And despite the years apart, it felt as if they'd known each other. And at some level, they'd always been together. And Lugh took his mother and her women with them back to Uisneach, where they lived happily until the time came when they had to cross through the veil to make room for the new people, the sons of Mill. So, remember Lugh's 2 brothers who fell into the sea before I could save them? Well, they didn't perish, but they were taken care of by the seal people. And you can still see them today as they swim around Tory Island and when they come ashore. And they're known as the Brothers of Lugh. Well, my story's at an end now. But before I go, remember, it was because of the women, Ethna and Balor, that the Tuatha Dé Danann were able to free themselves from the torment of the Fomorians. I'd like to remember the Ethnas and the Kians in this world who have not been able to bring up their own children for whatever reason. And I'd like to pay tribute to the Balors and the Lughs who have stood up to bullies and oppressors to free their people from oppression. And may we call upon the Balor and Lugh within all of us to stand up and be counted for what is right. Shine. So I hope you've enjoyed my story, and I will see you again in 2 weeks' time for an actual chat with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So until then, Slán go fóill.